was always interested in space and making things, so I chose to study architecture. That understanding of space and my experimentations with design, making spaces, led me to an understanding about how light can have a effect on how we understand what the form or the color of a space. So I was always drawn to design and creating things, but I learned that light has such an amazing power that I decided to continue in my studies with lighting design. The way you use light can transform the same space to have many different meanings. I understand light as a medium by which we give understanding to people. So if you take that understanding that light can facilitate a design story or facilitate an understanding of space, it has an amazing power that can not only create perceptions, but can also change perception. I definitely chose lighting. Yeah. Particularly, there was a moment when in the work I was doing with retail in Australia, where what I wanted to achieve was with light, I could not find anyone to collaborate with. So there were no lighting designers in the industry at that time. There was no school of lighting in Australia. So I had to do that myself. So I was first exposed to an understanding of light in my work in New York City. And there I worked with lighting designers to collaborate on projects, particularly residential projects. But when I came back to Australia, that didn't exist, that profession didn't exist. So I did it myself. So there was a moment where I changed from being an architect or an interior designer to a lighting designer. Both fields build design narratives. Every project has a story. That might be a very practical story, like a very sustainable building, or a heritage refurbishment architecture where you're reinstating something and protecting something, conserving something. Or it could be quite an emotional story, like most of our hospitality venues and bars and clubs, restaurants. There's a story around the food or around the environment that the designers build into their work, their creation. So light is supportive of an overall design narrative. So that way it's very similar. The materials are different. I'm not dealing with color and I'm not dealing with texture, but I am revealing color and I am revealing texture and I'm revealing form with light. That's why it's very important that those consultants, the designers, and whether they're lighting or interior architecture, all work together. Yeah, it was that process where I found that no one else was doing it, and at that time, I needed to do it myself. So I started my own business. There was a practical side to it as well, not just a business side. It was at a time in my life where I wanted to try something new and also to work part-time. So starting a new venture allowed me the flexibility to do that. Yeah, that's a really good question. I didn't understand any of that. I just did it because I wanted to do it. And then I found out later about the investment. It wasn't actually part-time, right? You might work 24 hours, but then the other 24 hours you're worrying about it or making phone calls or something. So it is a huge investment to start something new. But I was encouraged by the opportunity, and I was very naive. I didn't think about those things at the time. Experimenting. First 10 years were experimenting with light. I was lucky because I came from the architectural industry, so I knew many architects professionally and as friends as well. So I could speak the same language for a start. You know, we had the same understanding, and so there were a number of really interesting projects that I was able to work on where I could experiment with light, and a lot of that was experimenting at home or after hours, shining light onto water and what happens. And what happens if the water's still? What happens if the water's not still? Shining light under mirrors. What happens if you do this? What happens if you do that? So there was a lot of experimenting, and I was probably quite a theatrical approach to using the light. I was inspired the way that on theatre you can change space, but what I understood to grow to was that you could also change and form emotions in the audience, or in the terms of lighting design, you can form emotions with the people that are in the space. Form the emotions of them. So the initial experimenting with light and space kind of grew into a deeper understanding about how light affects people. Yes. And the interesting thing is that repeats as I moved to Thailand and now to Vietnam. So there is a growing awareness of lighting. So soon after I started, maybe after 5 years or so of working, the media kind of started to understand about light, and so it started to become a more popular subject. So that helped. There was suddenly, the conversation about light was in the design media. So slowly the market became more mature, but definitely throughout the whole 30 years of working, has a constant theme is, I put it as teaching or educating the market. Now looking back, I realize that is a predominant theme of what a lighting designer has to do. And not just me, I believe profession has to teach an understanding of lighting design. The second 10 years. The second 10 years were growing, spurred on by the Sydney Olympics. We were in Sydney. Sydney won the Olympics, and it wasn't just the venues, although they obviously had some really great lighting design. It was also all of the hospitality. And as we had come from a kind of starting with residential and then bars, we were well placed to move into the hospitality market and a lot of renovations and new projects of hospitality. And at that time, I got to work with other consultants from Asia, predominantly Singaporean consultants, interior design consultants, who were also appointed on the same jobs. So that allowed me to mix in a bigger circle. And so after the Olympics, I was invited to participate on projects in Asia. So that led to a joint venture arrangement in Singapore, which eventually led to opening an office in Thailand. So the next 10 years was definitely about growth. Those markets chose me in terms of I didn't say no to opportunities. Opportunities came to me and I said yes, and they led me to those markets. I didn't choose them. However, I do choose to stay in them. And the reason I choose to stay in these markets is there is a greater understanding amongst the Asian people I know and the Asian clients I have. There's a greater understanding of light on an intuitive level. So a Western view, and it would be really great to have this conversation with other people. But my take on the Western view is that it is a very intellectual understanding of light. It's quantifiable, and it's compliance-driven. There's a lot of emphasis on compliance-driven. That also exists in Asia, but there is an overlay of an intuitive understanding of light and how perception has an equal value to an intellectual understanding or a measurement of light. So that draws me here because that's how I think also. I'm very happy when I'm working on a project where clients intuitively understand the value that good lighting design can bring to them. As I explained earlier, I believe that light is the medium by which we understand the world. And I think that because I know that sight is our dominant sense, up to 80% of the information we take in is through our eyes. We also know that light facilitates that. If the lights are off, we don't see anything, for example. So light is the medium that facilitates our understanding of the world. And if we want to understand and live in harmony with our world, light is an amazing force that can shape our emotions. It can support our natural daily cycle of life. I'm talking about the biorhythms of the day. And it can also facilitate us doing things. You know, we all want to achieve things in our lives, and that's doing things and tasks. So light also facilitates visual aspects. So this people connection thing is about creating environments where people can live in harmony. Light hosts people in spaces. Right? Light is the host. So understanding light, we understand light as having those three things that I sort of touched on there. There's a visual aspect of light. Everyone sort of understands that. But what they may not understand so much is there's also an emotional impact of light. And there's a growing awareness how light can also affect us in terms of our biology, our health. So if you consider light in those three ways, those are three ways that lighting design can host life. That's the people connection. So this is starting to head into wellness, I think, which was quite an interesting aspect of hospitality design before the pandemic. But now I think there's a greater awareness, although it may not be so explicit, but I think there's a greater awareness of our society about a healthy lifestyle. The connections need to at least operate on three levels. We need to connect with ourselves. So that means there are spaces that are introspective or quiet or peaceful. And that will give emotional wellness, spiritual wellness. You can think of those spaces as being spaces where you connect with yourself. There are spaces where we connect with each other. So that's a community wellness issue. Extremely important, right? After all of that, what we went through, suddenly we realize how important connecting with other people is. And when we connect with people and we understand people, some of the situations that are existing in Europe now, for example, may not occur. And then, of course, there's the connection to the the natural environment. As humans, we are part of a natural ecosystem, so light can host the connection to our environment. Also, again, something that's been really reinforced by the pandemic. People talk about sustainability, but sustainability to me is more than energy conservation. Sustainability is living in a sustainable way in connection with our natural environment. So some of our projects are in natural environments that are quite sensitive. An example is Wa'ale Resort in Myanmar, which is a turtle sanctuary. The reason the resort is there is for people to enjoy that natural environment and to see, all the biodiversity and the ecosystem that's on that island. So naturally, the resort development, including lighting, had to respect that. So right from the start of a project like that, we write a reverse brief. Do you know what I mean by a reverse brief? So we take the brief given to us by the client and we rewrite that back to the client in terms of lighting. So in that brief, we would start to develop initial ideas or responses to do with those three characteristics of light. So we might give recommended light levels, for example. We would also start to talk about the moods, and we would demonstrate that with images or diagrams. And we also talk about the biodiversity or the biological aspect of light. On a site like that, obviously protecting the turtles was important. And obviously protecting the night sky is important. So right from that very early stage in the concept, you start to develop strategies that protect the environment. So we've done that, as I mentioned, in Wa'ale. We're also working on a resort in Sri Lanka, which is part of a national park. So that had quite stringent development controls on it as part of protecting that environment, and particularly the animals that lived there, which were quite large animals like leopards and elephants. So, we took that a stage further. So an example on those projects is that lighting is of a very warm color because most species on the planet cannot see wavelength light in the red spectrum, red or amber spectrum. So, using red light or amber light is almost unnoticed by the species. So it has no impact on what they do at night. So that's just a simple example. Also, reducing the impact of light in the environment through things like timers, so they're not on all night, they're only there if people go there or walk along the path. Using portable light sources like torches or lanterns to help see your way also protects the natural environment. And you put it in terms of human-centric lighting and planet-centric lighting, and how you can't have both. One will always be dominant over the other. I think the conversation around that, because there is truth in that, right? Because we have developed lifestyles that requires light at night to facilitate all the things we want to do. So there is a conflict, but the conversation should be about what is the reduction of the environmental impact to a point where the natural ecosystem can thrive. I believe the two can coexist. I believe you can facilitate all the things that humans need to do at night and still protect the natural environment and still see the night sky, still allow all of the nocturnal species like frogs and bird life to thrive. Well, sometimes we work communally. So just in purely interior design terms, there are spaces that are able to have meetings, for example, communal working. And there are also spaces for private working. And so the lighting for a workplace is often more skewed towards the biological impact of light, because we have a natural rhythm in our lives that's been built over thousands of years based on the pattern of the day, light and dark. So this is already built into our DNA and our human systems. And when we support that, we are able to concentrate better. When we support that, we're able to sleep better, we feel better, therefore we can perform better, so we can do our job better. So in the workplace, consideration needs to be given to creating spaces that are not all the same. And not only that, but the spaces should change with time. So intensity and color of light should change, which is the thinking that's around the human-centric lighting. So that, during the middle of the day, the light might be cooler and of a higher intensity to facilitate concentration. But towards the end of the day, the light colors warm up and the intensity drops to facilitate preparation for rest in the evening. Okay, that's one thing. I think that all of that is important and that change is important, but it's also important to have a change of spaces within the workplace. Not all tasks need 350 lux on the working surface. Some tasks are better lit in the sort of spaces we're sitting in now, where you might be thinking, where you might be developing ideas in a conversation, where you might be working on your phone or something. You don't need all of that light. There are places in the environment of a workplace you do need that light, and there are places where we don't need it. So for me, change is important, not a uniform lighting, and not a uniform lighting at every hour of the day. The dynamic change of lighting in a space or in a variety of spaces is really important in a workplace. So, yes, there are layers of light, and that's a good way to start to understand how to make a lighting design. I'm a little bit different than that. I believe that task lighting and accent lighting are the same thing. Task lighting is accent lighting for a task, whereas accent lighting is an object. So they're both kind of the same. And so the three layers that I tend to use are decorative lighting, accent lighting, and ambient lighting. Now, within each of those layers, the light, you can tune the light to have different characteristics. So let's take ambient lighting, overall lighting. You can tune the ambient lighting to have different intensities. You can tune the ambient lighting to have come from a different direction. It might be downlighting, it might be uplighting bounced off the ceiling. You can tune the ambient lighting to different color temperatures. You can even tune the ambient lighting to different colors, like hues, and you can tune the ambient lighting to change over time. So all of those characteristics can be applied to each of the layers, and how you use those characteristics will support that concept of light. The amount of light will help you with visual tasks. The contrast of light levels will help people understand what is important in a space. We always walk towards the brightest thing. The color temperatures and the colors of light will have effect on our both our emotions and our biologies. And of course, the change of light over time is a very important part of supporting our biological health. So generally, hospitality work is focused more on an emotional effect because you want to create a space that people will remember. Because if people remember a space, they usually want to go back to it. If they have good memories. So that's great for a hospitality space. That piece and that project was wonderful for us because it was a collaborative project with a company called Supernature, who are industrial designers, and Andy Hall, who's an interior designer. He was the interior designer on the project. So that piece was developed as the eye-catching centerpiece over the bar, which was in the center of the space. And the bar Nest is a vodka bar based around Grey Goose vodka, whose symbol is the goose. So the form and shape of the light, it has come from the pattern of the beating wings of a goose flying. So if you take a time-lapse photo or you Google time-lapse photo of a goose flying, you'll get the pattern. You'll get that pattern of that light. So that's the form of the light. And then the light in it was programmed to pulse along the length. It could glow softly, which it does during the day, And then as more activity happens in the space, more people arrive, the music gets louder, the piece also becomes more reactive and interactive, and colors become more vibrant, and it starts to have movement or change in it. So it's quite a centerpiece, and it's about generating that sort of wow moment, which is definitely supportive of the emotional side of light. And it does have change in it, so you can also, almost tell time from it because it changes over time. But really, it's mostly supporting the emotional side. So there's two nice stories about this job. One is someone came to me maybe after about 6 months, and they said, "I love the lighting because people think I'm much younger than I am." So that's a huge compliment, right? Then I know, yes, that's been successful. The other thing, and it's sort of the thing I tend to say to my clients, is that you look at Nest. This guy understood, the owner and operator of Nest, he understood the value of good lighting. He also understood the value of good food and being a good host. Lighting was part of that, and his bar, the profitability of his bar grew every year for 5 years, like significant growth. So maybe in the first year to second year it doubled, but then it grew again, and it grew again, and it grew again, and it grew again. That's also a measure of success. When a space is something where people want to go back to, especially a commercial space, then you can measure that in the income you get. And more people need to know about that. And more people need to understand the value that good design can bring, not just lighting design. I think that's one thing you talked a little bit earlier about educating the market. There's too much emphasis on measurable outcomes and not enough on outcomes that are intuitive, like I spoke about. And actually, they are measurable. The things that I'm talking to you about are measurable and have been measured in social science research about, tests about how people respond to color, to light, to environments. So they are measurable. But harder to understand. It's much easier to understand this is 300 lux and this is 200 lux. But that's such a small part of lighting design. I think it's important for all lighting designers to raise the awareness of lighting design in the industry. Just for purely commercial reasons, we should be educating our customers about the benefits of lighting design. I also believe that their lighting design offers incredible value. Therefore, promoting an understanding of what the value of lighting design can bring will lead to better projects. It'll lead to better results. It'll lead to better environments on projects that are community projects or communal projects. It will lead to a better outcome, a better built environment outcome for all of us. So there are huge benefits for the community, as well as just those commercial benefits. I'm probably driven more by the benefits to the built environment, which probably has something to do with my age, because when you look back and you look forward, you can see the value of things more. And if you want to, what is good lighting design? Good lighting design is creating a place that people can live in harmony with those, at least in the three aspects that I spoke to you about. There are probably more. Live in harmony with themselves, live in harmony with their neighbors and communal environments at nighttime that have artificial lighting, and live in harmony with the natural ecosystems that surround us. So, that I think is a great result. That's what I define as good lighting design. And promoting that can only make for a better place for all of us. I think that's probably quite a personal idea, and it's very simple terms, but they sum up, I think, the things that I've been speaking about this afternoon. Collaborator, we need to do things together. Lighting designers need to work with architects and interior designers to create a common design narrative. When light is in tune with the design of the space, it is much more powerful. So we need to be collaborators. We need to teach or promote a greater understanding of light, as we've spoken about. So I use the word teach. And that might be formally teaching in a school, but and it's certainly setting examples for your teams and teaching your teams. But it's also using projects as an opportunity to explain that greater awareness or greater understanding of light, the three characteristics. And then healing is really reference to the debate about human-centric lighting and developing that through an understanding of wellness to be planet-centric lighting, wellness being to live in harmony with the environment, yourself, and those around you. I'm excited to say, I think we're in great hands with the millennial generation. I think they're an awesome bunch of people because they've grown up native to the internet. They've grown up with an understanding that is far beyond their parents, an understanding of the world and the different diversity in the world. And so they have also seemed to have, from my understanding, a desire to change things, right? Because we can't go on the way we're going on. So I just think I'd love to empower the millennial generation. I hope they never lose the dream of the ability to change things, because the world needs changing. And I guess if I was going to give any sort of word of encouragement, it would be to do not automatically follow in the footsteps of your parents. The thinking of that generation has led us to where we are. The thinking of that generation, and I'm including myself, have led us to a point where we evaluate success usually in money terms only. The thinking of that generation has led us to a state where the natural environment is at the brink of collapse. We need to change the way we are thinking. Millennials have the energy and they have the ability through the internet to do that. So I definitely support my team in terms of my little part of that, the lighting design, to chase dreams, to change things for the better.